Some people cry when fired. Others scream. Me? When the termination email popped up right before the busiest shipping week, I just smiled, sipped my espresso, and typed one single line of code. Those men in expensive suits thought they saved a few $1,000,000. In reality, they just pulled the plug on their billion-dollar empire. Never cross a 34-year-old woman holding the keys to your network, because she will take the entire foundation with her. Hello to all the amazing listeners of Boss Revenge Stories, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your endless support. Unfortunately, YouTube has entirely demonetized our channel, leaving us with absolutely zero budget to continue operating, which means we are forced to pause all new video uploads here for the foreseeable future and transition our main operations over to Patreon. If you find today's story thrilling, please support us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon page, where you can listen to exclusive, verified true stories that are even better, significantly longer, and packed with intricate details we simply cannot publish on YouTube, all brought to life by multiple emotional voice actors within the same episode. You can join our community right now by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Now, let us begin today's corporate warfare, where my name is Harper Castillo. And this is the story of how I brought a logistics titan to its knees. I was right in the middle of a high-stakes video conference with our primary European distribution partners, orchestrating a massive international logistics contract for Apexian Dynamics from my corner office at our headquarters in Austin, Texas. I was navigating the intricate negotiations, securing a deal that would pump millions of dollars into the company pipeline. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady rhythm in the background as the European executives nodded along to my final pitch. We were seconds away from a handshake agreement. Then, the upper right corner of my monitor flashed. An email notification popped up from Julian Thorne, the newly minted Chief Operating Officer, who had just taken over the executive floor last month. I kept my eyes locked on the webcam, holding a warm, perfectly crafted professional smile, but my peripheral vision caught the preview text. The message was brief, cold, and entirely devoid of any human courtesy. Corporate restructuring. The position of Operations Data Architect is no longer required. Please hand over your assets and vacate the premises by 5 o'clock this afternoon. For a normal person, a sudden termination right before the busiest shipping week of the year would feel like a physical blow. Most people would freeze, stammer an apology to the clients, or let a tear slip out of pure shock and panic. I did not even blink. My heart rate did not spike. I maintained my absolute composure, smiled brightly into the camera, and told the executives, "We are in perfect alignment on our end. Gentlemen, I will have the finalized contract drafted and sent over for your legal team to review shortly. It has been an absolute pleasure doing business with you." I smoothly ended the call, leaving the screen completely black. The silence of my office rushed back in. I exhaled a slow, measured breath, stood up, and began to clear my desk. I did not ask for cardboard boxes. I did not pack up my files. I simply reached over and picked up my tiny potted cactus. I grabbed the small framed photograph of my beloved corgi. Finally, I reached behind my dual monitors, unplugged a sleek silver mini hard drive, and dropped it into my leather tote bag. I left everything else behind. 7 long years of crystal trophies, shiny dedication plaques, and framed leadership awards remained exactly where they were on the mahogany shelves. They meant absolutely nothing to me now. Before I officially logged out of my workstation for the last time, I needed to take care of one final administrative task. I bypassed the standard employee interfaces and tunneled directly into the company core system. I entered the Arachne network. This was the master delivery dispatch artificial intelligence, the very brain of the company that I had written from scratch. It was currently routing millions of packages, trucks, and drones across the country. I opened a secure command terminal, my fingers hovering over the mechanical keyboard for a fraction of a second. Then, I typed the execution code, revoke_license_774. I hit enter. The terminal flashed green, confirming the command had taken root deep within the system architecture. I slung my tote bag over my shoulder, walked out of my office, and headed down the long glass corridor toward the elevators. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. Standing right there in the lobby, surrounded by his usual group of sycophants, was Julian Thorne. He wore a sickening, triumphant smirk, clearly waiting to watch me do the walk of shame. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to yell, to beg, or to break down in front of his audience. Instead, I walked right up to him. I looked him dead in his eyes, gave a slow, polite nod, and stepped past him into the empty elevator car without uttering a single syllable. I pressed the button for the ground floor. The steel doors closed on his confused face, leaving behind a silent, digital time bomb ticking relentlessly in the server room. Exactly 30 minutes after my car tires left the corporate parking lot, the magnificent illusion of Apexian dynamics shattered into pieces. The National Operations Center, a sprawling architectural marvel designed to resemble a high-tech military command bunker, fell into absolute chaos. A massive decurved wall of high-definition monitors constantly displayed a vibrant, moving map of North America. Those screens were the pride and joy of the company. Millions of glowing green dots represented 18-wheeler trucks tearing down the interstate highways. Thousands of blue dots symbolized automated delivery drones weaving through crowded city skylines. The system was flawlessly juggling 2 million distinct shipping orders every single hour of the day. It was a masterpiece of modern commerce, a perfectly oiled machine generating endless revenue. Then, without a single warning klaxon, without a single error prompt, the music stopped. Every single monitor on the massive wall violently flickered, stuttered for a fraction of a second, and flatlined into a uniform, dead gray. The master artificial intelligence had completely halted in its tracks. The main dashboard status indicator, usually a bright and reassuring green, turned blood red and displayed two terrifying words: manual mode. In the modern logistics industry, especially at a scale of 2 million daily orders, manual mode is not a backup plan. It is a death sentence. Suddenly, thousands of heavy delivery trucks had their GPS routing software go completely blank in the middle of busy highways. Drivers were forced to pull onto the shoulders of the roads, entirely lost, staring at frozen tablets. Distribution hubs across the country reported that their automated conveyor belts had stopped moving. Barcode scanners began emitting endless error beeps. Thousands of automated delivery drones, abruptly disconnected from their central hive mind, hovered aimlessly in the sky until their fail-safe protocols forced them to land in random fields and parking lots. Up in the glass-walled executive suite, overlooking the operations floor, the arrogant smugness had entirely melted off Julian Thorne. Through the soundproof glass, the floor staff could not hear his voice, but his physical breakdown was a spectacle for the entire room to witness. He was screaming. His face was a mask of sheer panic. His expensive silk tie ripped open at the collar. He hurled a ceramic coffee mug against the wall, shattering it into dozens of pieces. As he barked frantic orders at the panicked system administrators below, Julian grabbed the lead database engineer by the shoulders, demanding that they roll the entire network back to the morning security backups immediately. The terrified engineer sprinted to the mainframe terminals, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard in a desperate attempt to reboot the servers. A moment later, the engineer looked up, his face entirely drained of color. He had to deliver the fatal news to the new executive. They could not restore the system from the backups, because the backups were completely empty. The core architecture had not been deleted or corrupted by a virus. The system had simply packed its bags, locked the doors from the outside, and taken the keys away. Miles away from that digital inferno, the evening breeze rolling off Lake Travis was absolutely perfect. I was sitting on the open wooden deck of my favorite waterfront bar in Austin, leaning back in a comfortable rattan chair. The sky above was painted in brilliant shades of tangerine, warm gold, and deep violet as the sun dipped slowly below the horizon. I picked up my frosted glass, letting the salted rim touch my lips, and took a slow, refreshing sip of a perfect, ice-cold margarita. The sharp bite of tequila and lime was a beautiful contrast to the sweet, intoxicating taste of absolute victory. On the wooden table right next to my drink, my smartphone was vibrating so violently it was practically dancing in circles across the polished surface. I glanced down at the screen. The notification list was a cascading waterfall of pure, unadulterated desperation. I counted exactly 50 missed calls. There were 15 frantic dials from the main information technology help desk. There were 12 urgent voice messages left by various panicked members of the board of directors, men who had previously ignored my existence. And at the very top of the pile, glowing with angry persistence, were 23 back-to-back calls from the personal cell phone of Julian Thorne. I did not decline his calls. I did not block his number. I just let the phone ring out into the void, watching his name flash on the bright screen while the ice clinked gently in my cocktail glass. I had intentionally left a tiny, untraceable backdoor connection into the internal corporate messaging channels on my mobile device. I opened the application, scrolling casually through the general company forums. It was absolute pandemonium. Thousands of employees were flooding the chat rooms, typing in all capital letters, terrified that the company was under a coordinated international cyber attack. The senior logistics coordinators were crying in the general channel about the blackout of the century. Nobody knew what was happening. They just knew the giant, billion-dollar heart of the company had suddenly lost its pulse. Amidst the endless sea of panicked chatter, a single, encrypted direct message popped up on my private channel. It was from Chloe, the sharp, brilliant young data analyst intern I had spent the last 2 years quietly mentoring and shielding from corporate politics, while all the highly paid male executives were running around like terrified animals. Chloe was the only person in the entire building smart enough to check the access logs and do the math. Her message was brief, observant, and sharp as a razor. "You took the heart of the system with you, did you not?" I smiled, setting my empty glass down on the wooden table as the acoustic guitar music swelled in the background of the bar. I did not type out a long explanation. I did not boast or confirm her suspicions with words. I simply opened my digital keyboard, selected a single fire emoji, and hit send. The grand theater of Apexian dynamics was burning to the ground, and the main event had only just started. To truly understand the beautiful disaster unfolding inside that glass building, you have to rewind the clock exactly 3 years. Back then, Apexian Dynamics was not a titan of industry. It was a sinking ship taking on water fast. Their outdated routing software was a chaotic mess, bleeding hundreds of thousands of dollars every single week in lost packages, delayed shipments, and massive fuel inefficiencies. They were standing right on the edge of filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I was the one who pulled them back from the ledge. I spent 6 long months living on cheap black coffee and sheer willpower, pulling 48-hour coding marathons in a cramped apartment to build the Arachne network entirely from scratch. But I was not naive. I knew corporate loyalty was a complete myth. When you build a life raft for a drowning corporation, the first thing they do once they are safely on shore is kick you out to make more room for their friends. So, instead of handing over my source code as standard intellectual property, I executed a flawless, quiet legal maneuver. I officially registered the entire algorithmic framework under an independent corporate entity I had created, called Castillo Tech. I did not sell the vital system to the executives. I merely leased it to them. I granted the company a highly specific, conditional usage license. Buried deep on page 47 of that original vendor agreement was a single, non-negotiable clause. It explicitly stated that if the original author and primary operator of the system was ever terminated from her position without legally validated, documented just cause, the software license would instantly and automatically revoke itself. Julian Thorne, of course, knew absolutely none of this. He was the classic breed of corporate parasite, a man who secured his executive position through golf course handshakes and thought he was the smartest person in any room. He looked at me, a woman in her early 30s holding a senior tech position, and saw an easy target. He did not bother to have the legal department pull my original employment contracts or read through the archived vendor agreements. Reading requires effort. and men like him do not do effort. His grand master plan was incredibly simple and entirely corrupt. He wanted to fire me, declare my high salary redundant, and then quietly hire his old college fraternity brother as an external consultant to manage the data department. They would siphon off the operational budget, split the massive year-end bonus for cutting overhead costs, and take all the credit for my flawless system. Unfortunately for him, his laziness was the exact shovel he used to dig his own grave. Back in the present moment, the executive boardroom at the headquarters had turned into a literal sweatbox. The head of the legal department, a man who made over $500,000 a year to protect the company, was staring at a printed copy of my original 3-year-old contract. His hands were shaking so violently that the paper was rustling in the dead silence of the room. The entire board of directors was gathered around the heavy mahogany table, waiting for him to confirm they were dealing with a massive cyber attack so they could call the federal authorities. Instead, the general counsel took off his glasses, rubbed his pale face, and delivered the ultimate death blow. "We are not being hacked," the lawyer whispered, his voice trembling. "There is no malware. There is no virus. She did not steal anything, and she did not break any laws. The system belongs entirely to her private company. We just fired our primary software vendor without cause, and the system automatically executed its legal right to lock us out. We do not own the code. We have zero legal right to force it back online." The realization hit the room like a physical shockwave. They had not just fired a redundant manager, they had legally thrown away the only oxygen tank keeping their billion-dollar operation alive. Down in his office, completely unhinged by the revelation that his brilliant cost-saving measure had just doomed the entire corporation, Julian resorted to the only tactic bullies know: intimidation. My phone vibrated on the bar table with a new incoming email. It was sent directly from Julian, bypassing all official human resources channels. I opened it. It was a frantic, desperate wall of text, completely lacking any professional decorum. "You listen to me, you little corporate saboteur," the email read. "I know exactly what you are doing. You are going to log back into that network right this second and restore full operational capacity. If you do not have those delivery trucks moving by midnight, I am going to sue you for tens of millions of dollars in corporate damages. I will personally see to it that you are thrown into a federal prison for industrial espionage and malicious destruction of company property. Turn it back on now, or your career is completely over." I sat at the bar, enjoying the cool evening breeze brushing past my face, and read the pathetic threat twice. He was grasping at straws, trying to use aggressive words to cover up his fatal mistake. He had absolutely no legal ground to stand on, and he knew it. But threatening an independent vendor with baseless federal crimes to force them into unpaid labor? That was a massive, undeniable violation of corporate law. I did not reply to his email. I did not engage with his temper tantrum. I simply tapped the forward button on my screen. I typed in the official complaint address for the Federal Trade Commission. For the subject line, I typed out a crisp, clear, and legally devastating sentence: "Report of threatening behavior, attempted extortion, and hostile retaliation from the leadership of Apexian Dynamics." I hit send, locking his legal coffin shut, and signaled the bartender for a second drink. By the time the sun rose over the Austin skyline the next morning, the private disaster had become a highly public national catastrophe. Every major financial news network was broadcasting breaking news alerts about the sudden, inexplicable paralysis of the national supply chain. Delivery hubs from coast to coast were gridlocked. Thousands of semi-trucks were sitting idle in massive parking lots, and millions of consumer packages were trapped in a digital purgatory. The stock market reacted with the brutal efficiency it always does. Within the first 2 hours of the morning trading session, shares of Apexian Dynamics plummeted by a staggering 15%. Millions of dollars in shareholder value evaporated into thin air before most of the executives had even finished their first cup of coffee. Desperate to stop the bleeding, Julian Thorne organized an emergency press conference on the steps of the headquarters. Standing before a sea of reporters and flashing camera lenses, he looked pale and exhausted, entirely stripped of the arrogant swagger he had displayed the day before. He leaned into the microphone, attempting to project an aura of calm control. "This is merely a minor technical glitch caused by a disgruntled former employee," Julian lied smoothly to the cameras, his voice carrying a practiced corporate cadence. "Our internal engineering teams are working around the clock, and I can personally guarantee that full system operations will be restored within 24 hours. There is absolutely no reason for panic." I was playing a dangerous game of public relations roulette, banking on the assumption that I would stay silent and hide in the shadows. He did not realize I had already positioned my next chess piece on the board. Exactly 5 minutes after Julian concluded his broadcast, I launched a devastating counterattack. From the official media channels of Castillo Tech, I released a comprehensive public statement. I did not resort to name-calling or emotional pleas. I simply published undeniable legal documentation. The press release provided ironclad proof that Apexian Dynamics was actively attempting to utilize proprietary, unlicensed technology that belonged entirely to my private firm. More importantly, I announced that my legal team had just successfully secured an emergency federal court injunction. This legally binding order explicitly forbade any engineer or executive at Apexian Dynamics from attempting to access, bypass, or tamper with the Arachne network source code. The trap was now fully sprung. Julian had just promised the national media that his engineers would fix the system, but the federal judge had just ordered them to keep their hands entirely off the keyboard under penalty of severe criminal charges. They were entirely paralyzed. While the external media tore into the glaring contradictions of Julian's press conference, a completely different kind of war was raging inside the corporate headquarters. Chloe, my brilliant protégée, had smoothly transitioned into the role of an invisible mole. She possessed the quiet ability to blend into the background, which allowed her to access the executive conference room during a closed-door meeting the previous week, using nothing but the voice recorder on her smartphone, hidden perfectly inside her notepad. She had captured Julian speaking freely with his inner circle. That morning, a highly encrypted audio file was uploaded simultaneously to dozens of prominent Reddit forums and Twitter channels. In the crisp, clear recording, Julian's voice echoed with sickening misogyny and arrogance. "We do not need to pay her that ridiculous salary anymore." Julian could be heard laughing over the clinking of expensive whiskey glasses. "We are going to squeeze her brain dry, extract every ounce of value from her little software project, and then kick her to the curb. My buddy from college can step in and run the maintenance for half the price." The internet exploded. The audio clip went viral in a matter of minutes. Social media platforms were flooded with overwhelming outrage, sparking a massive digital wildfire. The hashtags "Corporate Revenge and Justice for Harper" began trending globally, claiming the top spots on every major platform. Consumers threatened nationwide boycotts. Former and current employees began anonymously sharing their own horror stories of toxic management under Julian. He was no longer just a failing executive. He was now the public face of corporate greed and incompetence. The absolute final nail in the coffin was hammered in shortly after lunch. The high-level European distribution partners, the very same executives I had been speaking with when the termination email arrived, dialed directly into Julian's office. They had seen the plummeting stock. They had read the federal injunction, and they had listened to the viral audio recording. "We are officially terminating our proposed logistics contract, effective immediately," the lead European executive stated, his tone freezing cold. "We do not work with thieves, and we certainly do not entrust our international shipping infrastructure to an out-of-control entity that operates with such blatant disrespect for intellectual property and professional integrity. Do not contact us again." The billion-dollar deal was completely dead. The company was bleeding out on the trading floor, entirely locked out of their own operations, and facing public execution in the court of public opinion. Absolute desperation finally set in. By late afternoon, a sleek black town car pulled up directly in front of my private suburban residence. I watched through my high-definition security cameras as 3 senior members of the board of directors, accompanied by their lead corporate attorney, stepped out onto my driveway. They walked up to my front porch holding a glossy leather folder. Inside that folder was a blank check, pre-authorized for a multi-million-dollar settlement, and a newly drafted contract offering me a position on the executive board if I would just make the nightmare stop. They pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed through my quiet, peaceful hallway. I sat on my plush living room sofa, gently petting my corgi, and took a slow sip of hot chamomile tea. The doorbell rang a second time, followed by a frantic, pleading knock on the heavy oak wood. I did not stand up. I did not speak through the intercom. I let them stand out there in the sweltering Texas heat, sweating in their expensive tailored suits, until they finally realized that the door was never going to open. The calendar relentlessly marched forward to the single most critical, high-stakes date in the American retail industry, Black Friday. This was the exact day Apexian Dynamics needed their flawless routing system the absolute most. It was supposed to be a triumph of modern commerce, a day where millions of packages flowed like a perfectly orchestrated river. Instead, it became the day the company entirely collapsed under its own massive, paralyzed weight. Across the nation, from the rainy coast of Seattle to the sprawling industrial parks of New Jersey, towering fulfillment warehouses transformed into concrete tombs, millions upon millions of cardboard parcels, representing billions of dollars in consumer goods, were stacked high to the steel rafters, completely gridlocked. There was no artificial intelligence to tell the frantic forklift drivers where to go. There was no dispatch network to coordinate the massive fleet of waiting 18-wheeler trucks. The loading bays were eerily silent, choked by a backlog so severe it physically spilled out of the massive garage doors and into the employee parking lots. Delivery drivers sat on the curbs, smoking cigarettes and scrolling through their phones, entirely locked out of their routes. Panicked retailers, watching their highest-grossing day of the year turn into a logistical nightmare, did not just complain to their account managers, they weaponized their legal departments. Class action lawsuits rained down on the Apexian headquarters like heavy artillery fire, demanding immediate compensation for massive breach of contract, ruined promotional campaigns, and catastrophic revenue loss. The corporate giant was officially drowning in an ocean of legal and financial fire, while my former employers burned to the ground in a very public, humiliating spectacle broadcast on every major news network. I was standing in the center of a pristine, newly leased command center in downtown Austin. The air smelled of fresh paint and expensive espresso. The walls were lined with ultra-wide, curved glass monitors, casting a cool, crisp blue light across the polished concrete floors. This was the grand premiere. I officially launched my brand new logistics platform to the world. I called it Aura Freight. At its core, powering the entire operation with a quiet, terrifying efficiency, was a fully finalized, vastly upgraded iteration of the original Arachne network. It was significantly faster, vastly more intuitive, and completely immune to the kind of arrogant corporate tampering that had plagued my previous tenure. I stood with my arms crossed, watching with deep, quiet satisfaction as the system booted up, the tracking maps illuminating with perfect, vibrant clarity across North America. But here's the greatest, most devastating secret of my entire operation, the twist they never saw coming. I did not build this new empire all by myself. I had been laying the groundwork for this exact moment for over 6 long months, long before Julian Thorne ever drafted that cold, soulless termination email. I recognized the toxic rot spreading through the Apexian leadership. I knew the brilliant, hard-working minds keeping the company alive were being constantly undermined, severely underpaid, and deeply disrespected by men in tailored suits who did not understand a single line of code. So, I took action. I hosted quiet, off-the-record dinners at local steakhouses. I sent highly encrypted, untraceable messages. I slowly and carefully recruited the absolute top tier of the Apexian engineering, database, and infrastructure teams. I offered them significant equity, genuine respect, and the thrilling chance to build something extraordinary without the suffocating red tape. They were fiercely loyal to the elegant code we had built together, not to the corporate logo printed on their paychecks. On the exact same morning that Julian was scheduled to face the furious board of directors to explain the Black Friday disaster, 40 of his most critical, Irreplaceable senior engineers walked into the Human Resources Department. They did not shout or cause a dramatic scene. They simply handed in their identical, legally vetted letters of immediate resignation, placed their corporate badges on the reception desk, and walked out the front glass doors together. They left the Apexian servers completely undefended, a hollowed-out shell, and instantly drove across town to take their comfortable seats at the gleaming new operational terminals of Aura Freight. Right at the very front of that mass exodus was Chloe. She publicly severed her ties with the sinking ship, leaving behind her intern badge, and confidently strutted into my new corner office to claim her rightful title as my senior executive assistant. But Chloe did not just bring her brilliant analytical mind and sharp wit. She brought a meticulously compiled, heavily encrypted digital dossier containing the direct contact information for every single major VIP client currently screaming at the Apexian customer service representatives. These were massive international distributors, mega retailers, and vital supply chain partners who were desperately bleeding money by the second and actively looking for a lifeline. We did not even have to launch an expensive marketing campaign to win their business. Chloe simply sat at her pristine new mahogany desk and made a series of highly targeted, impeccably calm phone calls. She offered them a seamless, immediate digital migration to a perfectly stable, incredibly advanced network built by the exact same software architect they had implicitly trusted for years. The market response was an absolute avalanche, within exactly 48 hours of our system going live. A staggering 70% of the major Apexian client base legally severed their ties with the failing giant. They invoked the penalty clauses in their contracts to escape the wreckage, and immediately signed exclusive, long-term operational agreements with Aura Freight, because we guaranteed the stability and reliability they desperately required. This massive wave of incoming revenue included the highly lucrative European distribution partners who had slammed the phone down on Julian just a few days prior. They were absolutely thrilled to be back in business with a leader they actually respected, transferring millions of dollars into our new corporate accounts without a second thought. As I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, watching the city below, the absolute magnitude of the victory settled in. I did not merely execute a petty revenge plot against a terrible boss. I had legally, systematically, and ruthlessly drained the lifeblood out of the old empire to perfectly nourish a brand new empire, one entirely owned and commanded by me. The absolute endgame arrived swiftly and without a shred of mercy. Inside the heavily guarded executive boardroom of Apexian Dynamics, an emergency meeting was convened. The atmosphere was incredibly toxic, heavy with the stench of a dying corporation. Julian Thorne, the man who had strutted through the glass corridors like a king just days prior, was violently dragged out to serve as the ultimate sacrificial lamb. He sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, his face completely drained of blood, resembling a pale ghost. His hands shook uncontrollably as the chairman of the board violently slid a termination notice across the polished wood right into his lap. He was fired on the spot, stripped of his title, his access, and his dignity in front of the entire terrified executive team. But getting fired was merely the opening act of his personal destruction. The major institutional shareholders of Apexian Dynamics were out for blood, and they wanted a target they could destroy. They bypassed the corporate liability shield and filed a massive, deeply personal civil lawsuit directly against Julian. The charge was severe gross negligence resulting in catastrophic financial and property damage. The legal maneuver instantly froze all of his private bank accounts and placed his expensive sports cars and luxury real estate in direct jeopardy. He was staring down the barrel of total personal bankruptcy. A week later, the skies over Austin opened up in a relentless, freezing downpour. I was finishing up a late evening strategy session when my head of security informed me we had a loiterer by the front entrance, through the heavy sheet of rain, standing right outside the towering, illuminated glass facade of the Aura Freight headquarters, was Julian. He was completely soaked, shivering uncontrollably in his ruined designer suit, utterly desperate. He had been waiting out there for hours, praying for a brief conversation, begging for a tiny sliver of mercy, or a public statement to save his completely incinerated career. I walked out through the sliding glass doors, flanked closely by 3 large men from my executive security detail. The cold rain splashed against the pavement. I did not laugh at him. I did not scream. And I felt absolutely zero anger. When I looked into his bloodshot, pleading eyes, the only emotion I could muster was a chilling, detached pity. "You told me my position was redundant," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the falling rain with absolute clarity. "You were exactly right. Julian, I did not need Apexian. Apexian needed me. Now step out of my way. I have an entire corporation to run." I did not wait for his pathetic response. I turned my back and walked to my waiting armored car, leaving him standing alone in the cold dark. Exactly 3 months after that rainy night, the inevitable finally happened. Apexian Dynamics officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Their massive, arrogant corporate logo was physically unbolted and dismantled from the top of their flagship building, leaving behind nothing but empty brackets and rusted screws. The empire was dead. Up in my brand new, sprawling corner office, the morning sun poured through the massive windows. I sat comfortably in my plush leather executive chair, wrapping my hands around my favorite ceramic mug, and took a deep, satisfying sip of perfectly brewed espresso on the massive ultra-wide monitor dominating my desk. The opening bell of the stock exchange had just rung. The ticker symbol for Aura Freight was flashing a brilliant, undeniable green, soaring higher by the second. I smiled softly, gently folded my laptop shut, and leaned back to enjoy the absolute perfection of an irreversible victory. Thank you so incredibly much for staying until the very end and listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please let us know in the comments below. If you truly enjoyed today's journey, we humbly ask for your help, because our channel has been completely demonetized. We are forced to stop uploading new videos here on YouTube for the foreseeable future and must transition our operations over to Patreon. Please support us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon community so you can listen to the absolute best, highly detailed, exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can easily scan the QR code right here on your screen or use the Patreon link provided in the video description or the pinned comment to join us right now. Thank you again, and stay strong.